This is the story of the Lithuanian heart of a mother, a daughter, a country. The endless glacier mass of the Ice Age is beginning to retreat in the territory later known as Lithuania. Coming from the Jutland Peninsula, explorers endure bitter cold as they trudge across the terrain. They are migrating to this icy wilderness from the land that is present-day Poland. Many generations later, the climate becomes much warmer and forests develop. The pioneers are finally able to settle in one place and build better dwellings for their families. Thus, the first Lithuanian settlement is created. Lithuanians are a strong, determined people, but soon their resolve is tested. For many years, uncertainty, distrust, and fear fills the land of Lithuania. The thunder of guns and the pounding of sounds of horses charging into battle echo through the air. Smoke rises up against the distant horizon as castles and houses are burned to the ground. Cries of agony fill the villages when families receive news of the death of their loved ones. In 1795, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania is erased from the political map. Afterward, the Lithuanians live under the rule of the Russian Empire until the 20th century. They become unified in spirit and protective of their culture. It is a time of suppression in a land flooded with terror. Farms are forfeited. People are exiled to Siberia. The Lithuanian script is banned. Schools are closed. Russian is introduced. Catholics are persecuted and churches are prohibited. All printing, reading, or teaching must be in Russian. Lithuanians refuse to accept the Russian publications. In 1866, Bishop Valancius took a stand and organized the printing of Lithuanian literature in East Prussia and the smuggling of it into the country. He instructed his people to never attend Russian churches, to boycott the Russian schools, and to hold back on learning the Russian language. Book smugglers worked as a network throughout the country to aid Bishop Valancius. They smuggled publications printed in East Prussia across the heavily guarded Russian-German border into Lithuania. Once the books are transported across the border, they were distributed by a varied group of people: traveling salesmen, devout women, poor widows, beggars, farmers, students, large estate owners, housekeepers, physicians, and even their patients. It was dangerous. Sometimes they were chased with dogs and soldiers with guns, but that did not discourage them. Their hearts were determined not to allow their language to disappear. Lithuanians are forever grateful for each book smuggler who bravely slipped past 3 barriers of Russian soldiers patrolling the border area. Had there been no resistance, the language probably would have become a historical footnote, and the modern nation of Lithuania would never have been created. The book ban continues for 40 years. It was during the band that Jadvyga's parents, Rokas and Elizabeta, were born, grow up, and become friends. As is common in those days, they decide to marry after about 1 year of friendship. Because Lithuanian speaking and singing are not included in the band, the wedding was a customary celebration. Reluctantly, they also had to have a non-religious wedding ceremony performed at a Soviet-established wedding palace because the Russian law did not recognize church weddings. The high point of Elizabeta and Rokas' wedding is the hour-long sacramental celebration and Holy Mass. After that comes the traditional wedding feast. The most important feature of the Lithuanian wedding feast is the songs, music, and dancing. A guest shouts, "We must collect gifts for the married couple. It is time to dance with the bride." When each guest finishes dancing, he finds himself face to face with someone holding a hat. Into it, he drops a sum of money. Guests see that there is a net sum for the bride and bridegroom to start life upon. The wedding guests celebrate as the music continues the entire afternoon. During the evening ceremony, which continues until 3 morning, there is almost an uninterrupted series of dancing. According to the traditional wedding customs, every song or dance is a sort of dialogue between the guests, the wedding couple, and the supernatural being, blessing the newly married couple with prosperity, health, love, and a large family. The beer, specially brewed in Lithuania, is served throughout the festivities. Elizabeta and Rokas make their home in the village of Gryzia, a farming village in northern Lithuania. Jadvyga, their first child, is born May 1st, 1883, during the years of the book ban. Lithuanian life goes on, and the Vatkas family is busy, not only with home activities, but also with community concerns. The people working with book smugglers were brought together in a book distributing society. Jadvyga probably witnessed her grandparents' and her parents' activity in the society that operated right in their village from the time she was 2 until she was 12 years old. Not only were distributors of smuggled books punished, but even those caught with a single copy in their possession. The confiscated literature was destroyed. Jadvyga probably despised the Russians and lived in constant fear that her parents would be caught. Growing up in her modest thatched-roofed home in Gryzia, Jadvyga and her family sing at most occasions. Work songs lead them through their daily tasks. After dinner, they gather and sing. Sometimes father plays his wind instrument. Sometimes her brother plays a percussion instrument. The choice of traditional musical instruments depends on the reason for singing. When father gets out his string instrument, Everyone knows that they will be singing songs that have a deeper spiritual importance. Their singing fills the house. A profoundly devout intimacy bonds them together into a close-knit group. The non-state parish schools were closed as a result of harsh Russian policy. The government established new state schools to serve as an instrument of Russification. The teaching of the Lithuanian language was banned. A system of sudden searches, inspections, and spying spread fear among the teachers and the parents and the pupils. The policy of Russification that was carried out through the schools made the struggle for an education difficult. Parents withheld children from the schools, and they secretly attended illegal Lithuanian language schools set up in the homes in the village. The Hill of Crosses is located near Jadvyga's home village. People come from all over the world to see it, to climb the hill, and to place a cross of their own upon it. Records providing information about Jadvyga's teen years have not been located, but a passenger list indicates that she immigrated to America in February of 1901. For the first stage of her journey, she travels from her home village to Bremen, Germany. Bremen, her port of departure, is 822 miles away, which would take over a month traveling by horse and wagon. The railway is the most likely mode of travel, especially since there is a railroad station in Grazdayi. Jadvyga is traveling to America to meet her intended husband. The day of departure comes too quickly. After arriving at the station, Jadvyga sadly looks up at the huge steam engine with its black round body. This is her first train ride. She knows she'll be on this monster for over 25 hours. Before boarding the train, she says goodbye to her friends, her family, and everything familiar. She tries to be brave and hold back the tears as a sea of emotion rises up within her. She knows she may never see her family or homeland again. In Bremen, Jadvyga must pass various physical exams to ensure a certain level of health before embarking. When immigrants arrive at these control stations, their tribulations are not over. Even when many of them arrive at the German border with prepaid passages, the authorities and shipping companies often refuse to acknowledge these payments or find some error in them. The unfortunate refugees then have to return to Russia. Jadvyga trembles as she presents her ticket. Waiting with anticipation, she is relieved when she sees the nod of acceptance. At the control station, it is necessary to bathe and have the clothes disinfected. The people come from the outer to the inner room wrapped in a sheet. As they pass in their clothing for fumigation, a simple fleecing device of the agents is to tell them to take their money in their hands, as the intense heat during fumigation might destroy the bills. The agents then come to know to what extent they can bleed the immigrant. In 1889, the North German Lloyd Company started a special service of cargo steamers between Bremen and Baltimore to carry passengers and goods. Colon, the awning deck steamer, possessed a limit of 50 cabin accommodations, but had ample space for the transport of 1,600 steerage passengers and also for the hauling of large quantities of grain and cotton. Finally, the day of embarkation arrives. Jadvyga tries to be strong as she boards the electric tramway that carries her to the dock where the steamship Colon awaits. She joins the crowd with heavy packs and heavier hearts, climbing the gangplank. Bad-mannered crew directs the bewildered travelers to their quarters. Clean they are, but there is neither breathing space below nor deck room above. The passengers crowd into the hold of the Colon, packed like cattle. This makes a walk on deck when the weather is good very difficult. Breathing clean air below and when the hatches are down is impossible. Every cabin passenger who has seen and smelled the steerage from afar knows that it is often indecent and inhuman. Living conditions on board are primitive. Space and privacy are both hard to come by, even though the universal human needs of space, air, food, and sleep are recognized and somewhat provided by law. The persons carried on here are looked upon as free. The sleeping quarters are large compartments having berths in 2 tiers. They consist of iron framework containing a mattress, a pillow, or more often a life preserver as a substitute, and a blanket. The mattress and pillow are filled with straw or seaweed. It is February, and Jadvyga's blanket is far from adequate in size and weight. She has to retire almost fully dressed to keep warm. Through the entire voyage, the berths receive no attention from the stewards. The berth, 6 feet long and 2 feet wide, with a 2.5 feet of space above it, is all the space to which Jadvyga can claim. To this 30 cubic feet of space, she must, for the most part, confine herself throughout the journey. The floors of these large compartments are of wood. Sweeping is the only form of cleaning done. Sometimes the process is repeated several times a day. No sick cans are furnished, and not even large receptacles for waste. The vomit of the seasick is often permitted to remain a long time before being removed. The floors reek with foul odor because they are not washed. The open deck available to the steerage is limited. The sleeping compartments must be the constant quarters of a majority of the passengers. During the days of continued storm, the unprotected open deck cannot be used at all. During these storms, the door is latched closed, leaving passengers with little light or fresh air. The berths and the passageways between them are the only places where the steerage passenger can spend his time. The stench of vomit and unemptied chamber pots is overwhelming. When the sun shines upon the Atlantic and dries the deck space allotted to the passengers, they will come out of the hold, one by one, wrapped in the gray blankets. They are pitiful-looking objects. Huddled on the deck nearest the steam pipes, they await the return of life, which seems to have left them. It is at this time that cabin passengers from their spacious deck will look down upon them in pity, getting some sport from throwing sweets and pennies among the hopeless-looking mass. The food in steerage, which is miserable, is dealt out of huge kettles onto dinner pails provided by the steamship company. When it is distributed, the stronger push and crowd, so that meals are anything but orderly procedures. To receive her ration of food, Jadvyga, carrying her crude eating utensils, must pass in single file before the stewards who are serving. Then she finds a place wherever she can to eat. Later she washes her dishes and finds a hiding place for them where they may be safe until the next meal. There is always a rush afterwards for the single warm water faucet which has to serve the needs of hundreds. Seasickness is a constant companion for many travelers. A good many are sick and vomiting. Hospitals are recognized as necessary, and so one is provided on the colon, but the equipment is limited. Seasickness does not qualify for admittance. Not one thing is done for either the comfort or convenience of those suffering from it. Steerage as a whole is a congestion so intense, so injurious to health and morale, that there is nothing on land to equal it. Jadvyga wonders, is this what America is like? It is a long and difficult journey for the immigrants. Someone cries, "Land! Land!" Their spirits are lifted by the sight of the American flag waving over Fort McHenry as they enter the Baltimore harbor. For the immigrants, the voyage to America is an important and memorable experience. It is not only the changes that the arrival in America brings to their lives, but the very trip itself that makes a lasting impression upon them. Upon arrival at Locust Point in Baltimore, Maryland, the passengers began disembarking at the large immigration facility built by the B&O Railroad. Great bundles of baggage everywhere on the deck serve as seats. Some line the rail and look with wondering eyes at the strange new surroundings, while others stand and sit in emotionless indifference. Now and then a joyous face can be picked out by a few who have friends on the pier, but for the most part, there are none to welcome, no cries of recognition. The silence is strange and oppressive. For that vast majority, it is only the beginning of the end of their journey. With ticks fastened to the men's caps and to the dresses of the women, and with their own bills of lading in their trembling hands, they pass between rows of uniformed attendants. Jadvyga and the others are herded into separation pens where the final judgment awaits them. Jadvyga wonders, what questions will he ask? How much money will he take? Will he deal gently with me? The man at the gate has the difficult daily task of opening or shutting the gates, of saying, "This one shall be taken, and the other one shall be left behind." The law commands him to refuse admission, not merely to those physically or morally tainted in such a degree as to endanger the nation's life, but also to those persons likely to become a public charge. He is not responsible for the law, he is responsible for its execution. His decisions are sometimes as hard for him as for those who find the gates shut against them. With quick mechanical movements, Jadvyga and her fellow passengers are examined for general physical defects and for the dreaded glaucoma, a contagious eye disease. Immigrants are also checked for symptoms of serious illnesses that would warrant a more thorough inspection and possible hospitalization or deportation. The sifting process is taking place. Children who clung to their mother's skirts have disappeared and families have been divided. Those remaining intact cling to each other in a really tragic fear that they may share the fate of some of those previously examined. One by one, Jadvyga forges ahead with the immigrants, past the inspectors. They are then interviewed by a government agent who counts and records the money the immigrant has with him. Jadvyga obeys mechanically as she answers numerous questions and her baggage is inspected and weighed, her attitude toward the inspector being one of great respect. Since she plans to remain in Baltimore, Jadvyga is placed in a final pen to await pickup by the name on her immigration card. If an immigrant does plan to pick up his prepaid railroad ticket or purchases one and then waits in the large retaining room for his train, immigrants not staying in Baltimore are not permitted to leave the facility except to board their train. Jadvyga anxiously waits for her intended bridegroom. Her mind wanders. Past horrors of crop failures, famine, taxes, and the degrading treatment of Lithuanians were fresh in her memory. She and her family suffered much under the iron grip of the Russians. She doesn't look back on her trip voyage with fond memories. The trip contained a variety of trials, including seasickness, inadequate food, lack of privacy, cramped living quarters, and spreading illnesses. Also, landing on the shores of the land of the free and the home of the brave was not a pleasant experience. It is a hard, harsh fact encompassed by the relentless structure of the law that sifts, picks, and chooses, admitting the fit and excluding the weak and the helpless. Jadvyga is only 18 years old. She is sitting alone, waiting for her intended husband. She wonders what manner of life awaits her in this foreign land. She tries to be strong, but many emotions rise up within her. She longs for her beloved homeland, Lithuania.